Hello and welcome to Baobab Chats. Yet another episode. Fireworks coming today. We are engaging on this topic. What is the role of men in building a strong society today? We continuously hear, and we are all advocating for emancipation of different previously disadvantaged groups in our societies. And what has happened is, as we were reflecting, we realized and we're looking and saying, there are so many young men and even elderly men who are now kind of like confused. So where's my space? What space do I need to occupy? And as a result, we said, let's engage on this specific matter. What is the role of men? So just as a disclaimer, we are not talking about, other people's rights or roles have to be demolished. But the focus today, to have a different kind of approach is to speak about men, where do they fit in? What should they be doing? I have a packed panel today. People have prepared for this. We have joining us in Johannesburg, we've got Apostle Manyonda, and we've got all the way from the USA, we've got Yannick, Leanne joining us from Harare, Zimbabwe, and Sam joining us from Gqeberha in South Africa. I'll just give you guys an opportunity to introduce yourselves. Sam, you can start.
Hi, molweni. Igama lam nguSam, ndisuka eGqeberha, and it's good to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Apostle Manyonda.
I think you have introduced me already. Hi, my name is Apostle Manyonda from Johannesburg, South Africa, and it's also very good to be on Baobab, a very big tree that everybody can anchor on.
Thank you. Yannick.
Hey, hi, as you've already introduced me, my name is Yannick from New York City, Brooklyn to be exact, and I'm excited to have this conversation.
Great stuff. Leanne.
Hey, I'm Leanne Bernard, and it's good to be part of this panel. All the way from Harare, Zimbabwe.
All the way from Harare, Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Welcome, Leanne. And today we took a different approach in terms of our facilitation and hosting of the show. So we are going to be hosting the show between myself and Paul, because we thought this was a very important discussion. We thought, let's go this together. Oh, my man.
Yeah, welcome, guys. I can't wait to get into this one. Like, I've been getting a couple of emails from guys who are oozing some wisdom on how we should have relabel this topic and actually talk about men in general. Thank you, Stan.
Great stuff. So let's start right there. We can start with you, Apostle Manyonda. Where do men sit today in society? Do they have a specific place that they need to occupy? And if they do so, where is that? And has this place changed over the years, or things are just the way they were always?
Hi, everybody. Once again, good morning. Surely the roles have changed for men in our society, and the big question is, have they changed for the better or the worse? These are some of the things that we are going to tackle. We have had a number of dynamics that we have come in. We have had the dynamics of things like migration. We have had the dynamics of industrialization. We also have had the dynamics of many families now where they're not being raised, or the society has got less men and more women. So we now begin to find, the function of men being diluted. But what I'll then begin to present, in this conversation as it goes on, is what was the original pattern of man. Because if you can understand the original pattern, then we can always repair that which is damaged.
Just as a reminder, and for those who are watching Baobab Chats for the first time, so on Baobab Chats, our conversations have to flow naturally, right? And there's no holds barred. So people can jump in when someone is making a comment so that they can also share their comment. This is the way it goes. So when you see it happening, don't panic. This is where we are. Leanne.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I like what Apostle said. Well, just to chip in on how things have changed in the role of men. Back then, our forefathers' days, the men's role was to go out, hunt, or go out and fight for the war. And the women would stay at home with the kids, cook, and obviously knowing that daddy's out there fighting for whatever reason, the country. So that concept was then carried into the modern age, which is now. We'll fast forward to now, whereas it's different. Men and women both can go out and work. Majority of the women actually make more than the men. So you find that even men can stay at home in this day and age whilst the wife goes to work. So what is the excuse now as a role of a man in society? I'm going to bring in a bit of statistics, which might then raise the debate to escalate it. Okay, so with the role of men in society, your role is to work, cultivate, protect, and guard, and at the same time command. Whereas 93% of criminal acts are done by men. So where are these men? These men are put up in this house called a prison. So who have you left out here to feed, protect, guard, and obviously build this country as you want us to build it? You've left us, the women, to do it. But unfortunately, we're at a cousin's place, mother's house, trying to earn meat because our man is behind bars, a home of which the taxpayers have to pay to feed you, clothe you, So whereas this money should be channeled towards building bridges, building roads, schools, and the taxpayers' money is coming to the prisons. We have to pay the prison officers, we have to pay the judges, we have to pay all that. So the role of men in society has really changed. It is no longer the same. So yeah, that's my opening statement.
Yeah, and you make some very interesting points there. Maybe I shouldn't start, responding to them, but as we go on, Yannick, you might want to respond to those as well, and to what Apostle Manyonda, give your opening remarks as well.
Absolutely. Good morning once again. Absolutely. I think certainly I certainly agree with some aspects of what Leanne has mentioned. In terms of where I view the role of men today, or where men are today, I would say that the role of men has been somewhat forced to change in essence. As Leanne mentioned, women are entering the workforce in an unprecedented number. Lots of women are participating in our society in a much different way than they did in the past. So I think that from an economical perspective, I think that the roles of men have changed by force. The market has forced men to rethink their roles in society. In terms of thinking about that, in terms of from a binary perspective, I think I can only speak from a U.S. perspective. In America, in the last 100 years, we've seen the roles of women change drastically. We've seen women enter the workforce. We've seen women enter many different sectors of business or in terms of work in life. So we're seeing somewhat of an equity in terms of from a U.S. perspective. So I totally, from this perspective, would agree with Leanne in terms of women entering the workforce and just kind of making that space a little bit more dynamic, I would say.
So there's an interesting point here. So I hear, the fact that there seems to be an agreement that the role of men has changed. But there's also seems to be this aspect of, it's being forced to change, coming through. And on top of that, Leanne went on to speak about things like men being in prison and men abdicating their role. So this brings in a bit of a difference between, whether men are deciding to make that decision, or, the system is putting men in where they are, because you find a lot of men are committing crimes and stuff like that because they're trying to do what they've been told is supposed to be their role, to fulfill that role. But Sam? Go ahead, Sam, you're on mute.
Hi.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. I just want to put a disclaimer that I am currently traveling. So if you see me emotweni, that's the reason why. Thank you so much for the opportunity to engage, and I've been quite stimulated by some of the opening remarks. I don't want to quite yet unpack those and respond, but what I would raise are three things as part of my own opening remarks. I would say, one, when we talk about history, whose history are we talking about? And is that history, is it an accurate account of the role women have played historically, contextually, and culturally in building society? And I think that's quite a critical point of departure. I think the apostle somewhat touched on it. I think we really need to delve into some of the constructs and roles and stereotypes that have been ascribed historically to the genders. And by saying that, I of course don't want to exclude non-binary folk in this conversation. But I think that's quite critical, because the history that we've been told and taught is that of women have not had a direct role in building infrastructure, in building economies, in building nations. And we know that this is not true. It is a falsehood. We know that we have been taught a narrative that suggests that our only, or at least primary, role has been to nurture and to care. And I often wonder if that narrative is not intentional and it is not deliberate on the part of some men, not all men, in how we shape the positionality and roles of women and men alike. The second thing I wanted to say is, I do believe that the struggle is intersectional. And so I think that, we would need to, in our discussion on defining and unpacking the role of men, understand, the historical socio-economic context of, for example, Black men in comparison to their white male counterparts. I think that's also quite critical in the discussion. When we speak of unemployed men, when we speak of men who are dispossessed of their land, in relation to women, and what the effect is of the direct effect that is on women and girl children. And lastly, I think my third opening remark would be around the boy child. How are we raising the boy child in preparation for manhood? And what does that look like? What are we teaching young boys in terms of their thinking and their behavior towards their female counterparts? So those would be some of my opening remarks.
Wow.
Yeah, this is so going to be a roller coaster. I actually expected this to happen today, just before in. Right now, my only challenge, and I think a lot of you guys will agree with me here, is that this is how difficult it is. We want to talk about men and the role they play in society, and all together now we are all being pulled towards defining the roles of women and speak about women as if there's this taboo that has been created about selfish as men, and selfish in a good way. We look out for ourselves. We look out for what's the best for men's mental health, what's the best for men's spirituality, what is the best for men in terms of wealth and everything else. it seems as if when we sit down to talk about men, we are in a way undermining women. When in actual fact, when we really sit down to think about this, and I don't want to preempt everything here, God did not intend battle of the sexes when he put Eve in the garden together with Adam. There has to be a way society and media has driven us to this age where we speak about men and men empowerment. We have this guilt that we also have to incorporate women. But when we cross on the other side of the divide and we're empowering women and we're talking about women empowerment, we know that's a line we don't cross to also include men in that space.
Yeah. You're on mute.
Can you on mute, Stan?
Let me see
You
what's
guys
going on
on
here. I think Stan is having a small technical problem here. But yeah, like I was saying
You
earlier,
are audible. Yeah.
All right,
Okay,
sorry.
Apostle,
I'm back
go
on.
in.
Okay, I'm back on. So I was saying, this is part of the difficult place that we find ourselves in today, where because there is so many isms and there is so many reconfiguration of society, it makes it challenging at times to engage on any particular issue without having to offend or to seem to offend the other side of the story. And like what Paul, you were saying, and some people come and say, look, it's the same thing as when people say Black Lives Matter, and someone comes and say, yeah, but today we are talking about White Lives Matter. And someone comes and say, why should we talk about White Lives Matter? They've, you know, and it's a dichotomy that we find ourselves in that we have to navigate through. And this is the society we live in, and we have to deal with this specific thing. Someone wanted to jump in. Was it you?
Okay. Let me just say, everybody has touched on a point of departure here, and whether agreed or not. But let me just say to you, when you look at the construct of life, life is built on systems, and every system works with a hierarchy. It doesn't matter what your ism is. It doesn't matter. Every system is built on hierarchy. Now, my point of departure is going to be the oldest history book, what I have believed in, that which has modeled the society. And I'm just going to give you what I call the 5 original fundamental functions of a man based on the Bible. Number 1, you are going to find that a man, according to scripture, we are talking of the Edenic model, the original intention of God. Remember, I've been introduced as apostle. Number 1, a man in the garden was taken, his mandate was visionary. So we must understand, you know, this has got nothing to do with gender. This has got something to do with a prescribed role. He was taken in as a visionary. So you'll find that in Genesis chapter 2, verse 15, when the Lord is speaking to men, and this is an assignment. Number 2, when you begin to realize that man also, in terms of a hierarchy, man is given the role of a constitutional court. Your role is to put the command. You write the law, but the woman has got to be the one that executes the law. Hence, the Lord had to speak the law to Adam, and Eve had to execute the law. So does it make any one of them lesser than the other? Precisely not. This is just roles. Number 3, you will find that man was put in as production director, and a woman was put in as the one that makes sure the production is in tune. And does that make a woman lesser? Precisely not. So one of the things that
Apostle, I want you to continue, but I don't want to lose and miss some of the points, because you're unpacking quite a lot. I just want you to put a comma there. Leanne, I saw you going through your notes, wanting to respond to that, so let's respond to that quickly, and then we'll come back to you. Let's go to Leanne and Sam.
Yeah. Okay. basically we're not going to highlight on a woman's role, because today we want to tackle the man's role in society. Because if we miss this point, then we are going to go off guard. So for majority are going to base it on economic situation, and this is why men are in this situation. But if we refer back to apostles' basis, which is a standard is a standard. How do men then now raise the standard to say, listen, for the boy child to follow suit and help build our society, our nation, our world, our people? How best can we help them? A standard is a standard. For example, you cannot place a product is determined by the manufacturer. You cannot buy Mazoe juice and pour it into a petrol car. It's a standard set by the manufacturer. It's a fruit juice. Have your juice and drink it. If you want petrol, you go to the fuel station. And the car is not overdriven because of its time and roll, but because of the petrol that goes into the car. So men need to derive from poverty. Poverty is not lack of or absence of money. It is the absence of ideas. So generally, if a man has an idea to build, create, to love, and to protect, because that's your role. You are there to protect us as the woman who are in your society, to say, okay, if you have that mentality, we're able to build in terms of, like I'm saying, infrastructure, politics alone. You know, if we have decision-making people in high office and are of the norm of saying, how best can we make this a bit? Because men need to think of the children. If you don't have the children in mind, then there's no way where you're going. That's why you then result to alcohol, you result to stealing, drugs, and the highest contribution is violence. So if we have that mentality changed, of which women, I'm going to bring in women now, because without you men, we would not be able to produce. So majority of dropouts are men. About, let's say, 82%, according to stats, 82% of dropouts from school are men. So the women are left to marry uneducated men who then abuse, who then and are fatherless, because 7 out of 10 children are born fatherless in hospitals. So how then do we expect these little kids coming to be raised by a man when the man's absence is nowhere to be found? So the role, if you know your role as a man, then we can start talking. So let's address these problems first to then bring in the men.
If I may jump in here, I think it's critically important, as the apostle mentioned here and Leanne mentioned. I think it's critically important to have a very clear understanding what we mean by man and woman, because those are really very binary approaches at viewing gender roles, right? We're looking at a world that has been defined, and religion has perpetuated this idea of what the roles of a man are, what the roles of a woman, what those roles are. It's predefined and it's perpetuated in our society. And I deviate from that perspective in terms of redefining those perspectives, because I think that sex has to do with biology and gender has to do with performance. I think we need to redefine what we view as feminine, what we view as male and feminine, what we view as what is a man's role and what is a woman's role. Because we've seen how these ideas, we've seen how these positions have subjugated a group. We see how these ideas subjugate groups in different spectrums. We see how the domination of white supremacy has subjugated the Black experience, specifically speaking from an American's perspective. We see how white supremacy has subjugated the contributions of African Americans in America. We've seen how white supremacy has whitewashed a lot of the contributions of African Americans in America. And in today's world, we're seeing how, when we uncover that history, we see the contributions that African Americans have had in America. And today we even talk about American history being Black history. The same can be said about men and women's roles in America, and I would even be pushed to say in most of Africa. We see how the perpetuation of the macho man and the docile woman hasn't really pushed us forward. I think in redefining this space, we really have to view as, how do we view people as human beings? How do we view people as defining the role that they want to occupy in our society? And do we move from there? Do we see where, when we allow people, human beings, to decide the role that they want to perform in our society, how we can open and have a more open space for all parties to kind of move our society forward.
Yeah.
We've seen a world where, when we allow these people to perform in the way that they want to perform, the contributions that they can have. So I think I kind of disagree in terms of there are very static. There's a very static perspective on what a female's role is, or a very static perspective on what a male's role is. And in terms of and to the apostle, while I do respect your you are an apostle, and I do respect your role in the church, I think that the Christian doctrine has been a huge perpetuator of patriarchy in our world. We've seen how Christianity has subjugated not only women, have subjugated people of color, have subjugated non-binary folks. So I kind of disagree with the Bible being the oldest piece of literature in today's world. I think I deviate from that perspective, Apostle.
So this is very interesting, and we want to just take a quick short break. But when we come back, and we will, Sam, I know you need to give your perspective on this as well, and we'll come back to you, Apostle, because Yannick is raising a very critical point, and we don't want to go around in a circle. But one of the things that we want to talk about is, Apostle, you were unpacking it from a Christian perspective and looking through the scriptures. But we also want one of the panels, right? And even you, Yannick, you're saying we need to look at it from, not necessarily from that role, but now looking at it, let's say not from a Christian background, whichever other perspectives you want to look at it, what is that role? Because it's okay and fine to say, we have a concern on using this perspective. Now let's look at it from that different perspective. We'll take a short break just to announce, a show that we have that started this week with Tandiwe, Real Talk, that we have every Thursday at 9:30 p.m. Central African Time. Right, great. We are back. And I just want to quickly give a shout out. I can't go through all the comments, but the comment section is on fire. We've got, Tandiwe, Judith, Amanda, Ruzani, a lot of shout outs to people who are on the panel. And I really can't go through all of them. But, we are taking those comments. And a lot of people are agreeing and some are disagreeing. A lot are agreeing on the perspective of saying today we need to talk about men. And a lot of them are agreeing on the Christian perspective. And it's interesting that I see some ladies as well agreeing on the issue of saying women stop crashing the party. Today we're talking about men. So let's unpack it more just on this one. Just quick one or two. We can start with you, Sam.
Can I come and stand quickly before Sam goes in? I just want to just put some fuse onto something here. Because it seems like it's getting too hot, something might break here. Growing up, as kids, we saw our counterparts, which is females, obviously, playing with dolls and modeling the lives they want to live as they grow as adults. The only thing we could do as boys is bang, bang, smash, bang, bang. It's sport and crashing cars. We did not have a model to look at and say, this is probably the only thing we had was watching Santa Barbara on TV and learn how to kiss. That's all we could do as men and how to propose. Apart from that, our role was academics and sport. And look at our female that they know them well and they execute them well because they learned them from a very young age. When it comes to us, I was actually saying to someone, the last bit of advice that I really lived with in my years now came from my dad when I was at age 12. So you find that in the Xhosa culture, which is where we are here in Gqeberha, they have schools of initiation where they take young men and begin to teach them the important aspects of their culture and how what their roles are in the Xhosa culture. We don't necessarily say all cultures should do that, and there are some bad practices that come with that, but that's an initiative that has been put out there to say this is a blueprint. We are going to take our young men into the bush, spend time with them, and talk to them about what they should do, which is not in all of our African communities.
Which Paul, I don't want to we've had a conversation on this panel, and interestingly, not to attack different cultures, where there were different views as well expressed about the initiation schools and how that is building the modern day man. But that's not the conversation today. Sam, it seems Sam is a bit frozen. So Apostle, we jump back to you. Or Leanne, you want to jump in because okay, Apostle.
Let me just say this.
All right.
There are some things about life that are true, regardless of your belief system. And like I said, life is built on a system. And let's take life as a vehicle. There is no way a tire can do the work of a steering wheel, and there is no way the steering wheel will do the work of a carburetor. Does that make a carburetor much better than the tire? Precisely not. Does that make the steering wheel better than the exhaust? Precisely not. It's just a matter of role. So whether we are talking of I know people talk about religion and so on, and it is unfortunate that people who actually comment a lot on Christian the way it's supposed to be, do not really understand the constructs of how it's supposed to be presented. There is no way that the Bible is a tool to oppress women. In fact, if you do understand how the system was put in the Bible, it was just a matter of separating roles. Pelile, that's it, separating roles. So that when you work in life, this was his role, this one knows your role. So you will begin, and Leanne, I think, said it as well. Even you, Yerrick, we scream a lot about color. We scream a lot about Black Americans and so on. But in conversation, it's going to build societies. It must be above color, because we are in a season where you are getting people going everywhere. Black people are going to Australia. Australians are coming to Africa. You are getting Africans going to India. So how then and you are Hindu, you are Buddhist, you are Christian. But what we are saying is, if you meet as men together, if you meet as women together, how best can you build the society regardless of your differences? But for me, what I think a building block is a building block. There is no way a brick will become, speaking from an engineering point of view, there is no way a brick will forever become cement, and cement will never become a brick. So let's work on roles, on just roles, and color. Especially, I've raised many men who are leaders, many women who are leaders. If you look at my profile, and one of the things that I have always said is, life is not about gender or color. It's about merit. It's about what you can do. So if we can raise this discussion above men, and when I say men as well, we have women who have become men. This is what I was going to say. Single mothers, they have become men. Why? Because the father is absent. And you'll begin to realize that they are playing two roles. So those women, again, if we exclude them from this conversation, they will come back and attack us because they are now playing the role of a mother. You come to Leanne, and Leanne will tell you that according to statistics here in South Africa, 70% of this nation is being raised by women, and which means it's not gender, it's not gender, it's function we are talking about. It's function.
Yeah. So Apostle, Yannick, I know this came around, and I wanted to come back to you, and then we have to move on from this discussion point, so that we can keep rolling. But we'll come exactly to you. I just want to pinpoint a specific distinction that I'm picking up from what we're talking about as well. That there's an issue of classification, there's an issue of function, there's an issue of use, right, and intention. So when it comes to the Christian perspective, I hear Apostle talking about what's the intention and what it has been used for, the same way, and then he unpacks the other sides as well. I just thought I would like to. So Yannick, will come to you, then we'll move on from this one.
Absolutely. I just want to mention in terms of, as the Apostle mentioned, in terms of function and structure, I think that it's been very clear that the structure that the Christian perspective gives us in terms of women is very narrow. We've seen women described in terms of purity, submissiveness, docility. And when we look at the reality of women, today, we're seeing women carving a different space for themselves. We're seeing women saying that this narrow perspective isn't the reality of their lives. We're seeing women carving a specific lane for themselves. Women are saying, it's not about my purity. It's not about me being submissive to support my husband. It isn't about me being docile. We're seeing women. I think there's a structure. I think there's a clear structure that the apostle is giving us here in terms of this is a structure, and he believes that this structure is the static structure that is supposed to continuously move society forward. But when we look at the lives of women have continuously been telling us that this characterization is narrow in all aspects of our lives. If you speak to the average woman today that talks about what does she feel about purity? What is purity? Purity is limiting, and we're seeing the woman opening that conversation and redefining what it really means for them to be a woman, and that has had more of a contribution in our society than such a narrow perspective that has been given by the Bible, in my opinion.
No.
Yeah. So we at some point we have to agree to disagree so that we are able to move on from a point. And with balancing, but I just want to give you some 30 seconds on this because I know the network. It seems like the Gqeberha network, there's a problem. So for some of you who don't know, we've got a city in South Africa called Port Elizabeth, which has been divided into two, into Gqeberha and Port Elizabeth. I say so because we see Paul is in the same city. He is saying he's in Port Elizabeth. Sam is in the same city. She's saying she's in Gqeberha. But both of them, their networks are giving us problems today. So it seems like even the boosters are struggling. But Sam, 30 seconds, just your response to this. 30 seconds, my dear.
Yeah, I think I don't want to comment on that. I think just very quickly, I think that it's one thing for men panelists to come online onto this discussion and give us this description of, the conditions women are subjected to, the positionality of women in society, which we all know. My brothers, us as sisters, as women ourselves, we live this on a daily basis. I think for me, what is critical to this discussion is what as men are you doing about that? What is your role in reimagining a more responsive, a more inclusive, and a more transformative society? What direct role do you play? How does that affect you How does it affect us as women? And are you willing to play that role or not? In your 30 seconds, then. That's
Thank you.
honestly for me what is at the heart of this discussion.
Thank you, Sam. So we as we get into this next segment, Paul is going to be leading on this segment, and now we want to you're directing us to where we were going, Sam, where we want to talk now about internally, right? What is it that, Leanne, you expect from a man? Because I think this is part of where the conversation will go. We're not saying you need a man in your life. Let's clarify that. But when you look at men in the loose definition, and then when we come to the men who are on the panel, what's your expectation of yourself? What are you doing? There's a lot of people in terms of, in the comment section talking about men have become useless. Men are not adjusting. They are not changing. We are saying men, but a lot of, I saw someone who was saying when people moved in the African context from the rural areas, everyone had defined roles. But when they moved to the cities, men were left without a role. Women still continued cleaning the house, cooking and everything. The only thing that a man would do is to go to work. So let's go into that and we start to unpack that. But yeah, Paul, you can take it on, my man.
Well, for me, my hooves are burning. My hooves have been burning since we started, because when someone comes in, they bring in a different perspective and it changes the whole thing altogether. But yeah, I was actually thinking when I mentioned closer culture and the initiation schools, I might not have clarified my exact point, because in this we see that there's a group of men in a certain culture that have taken upon themselves to say, we are going to play a part and not leave it to chance that something is instilled in the brain of a boy child. And we cannot take this lightly. What we need to be able to do now is look for probably recommendations and step-by-step processes. I was talking to a closer guy, and I'm mentioning this because you also mentioned the ills of initiation schools. And roles, like any other thing in society we're living in, evolves. There's an evolution of roles each and every day. We sort of need, and I speak this in the African context, as Africans, as we sit under this baobab, we constantly need to remind ourselves that we've been shooting a lot of things on the hip. We just grab a Rambo machine gun and start firing. And we could have a syllabus laid down, a basic syllabus just laid down, even in school, on educating men, because the ills of society we are seeing today are obviously because men don't understand their roles. So there has to be interventions that are clear and defined, that are obviously above board, that a male child needs to go through this and understand their role in the society they're going to grow up in, and not wait for them to make a mistake. We incarcerate them, and then we begin to start teaching them those roles while they're in prison. I'm going to put this, I'm this to you, Yannick, right now. The perspective that I'm bringing is because I'm a Christian, and I feel challenged by what you're saying, because I disagree with most of what you're saying. But I think in my disagreement with what you're saying, I'm also trying to learn something that is outside of my comfort zone and see, because I didn't understand the perspective you brought in of how narrow you think our approach is when you use the Bible. But at the same time, I feel like we're not all Christians in the world. So that perspective matters at the end of the day. Yannick.
Absolutely. I think dealing with it from I think there's a perspective that we can look at this from the reality of what's happening currently. When we look at the structures, when we look at the work, when we look at the workplace, when we look at our society today, we can look at it from a realistic perspective. Realistically, we are still very much dominated, especially in the Western world. We're still very much dominated by a Western perspective, a biblical perspective of the roles that men and women play. But in terms of, as Sam mentioned, what roles, what positions do we want to play today as men? What are we aspiring today as men? And I think Sam mentioned earlier this idea of intersectionality, recognizing that all voices need to be heard in order for us to move in a much more dynamic way. Looking at myself as a Black man in America, I know that my struggle as a Black man in America is totally different from the experience of what Black women in America have experienced. So from my perspective, my role as a Black American man is to lifting up the voices of African American women in this country. And that's where I think that we see their contributions being elevated, because they've always contributed. Because I think that oftentimes we think that if you've never heard of it, if it isn't popular, if it isn't something that you've read in common literature, that these people haven't had contributions. We know it's very evident of how clearly that how false that actually is. So I think that the role that I play today in society is to redefining that the space that I occupy, and how that space that I occupy elevates the Black woman who has been subjugated much more than I have in America. So that's where I think my role plays in today's world. But in terms of, to your question, Paul, in terms of where the Bible and where this in the reality, we are very much still dominated by a Christian perspective. And my views on Christianity have much more to do with a perspective of a whitewashed view of a doctrine. So that's another conversation of its own. But I don't think that Christianity today has a place in really defining the roles of women and women. But if we have to deal with reality, Christianity still has a very much of a stronghold in Western culture today.
I see Leanne is shaking her head.
Like, seriously. Oh no.
Absolutely. Guys, you are all going to have a chance to do a 10-15 minute taking on your own that we'll post on this week, because it will not do justice to a lot of things. With your perspective and fire away.
Clearly, okay. Just to correct you, Yannicka, without a biblical foundation, as a man, you will never know your role. Let's look at what I brought when I said to you, let's bring the real men back to sanity. Let's bring sanity back to society. How are we doing this? Okay, without knowing your role, who is there to teach this young boy prayer, loving, caring? Because if you don't know your role as a man to protect, I keep saying this because majority of us women, and I'll speak for myself, is having to raise a boy child without knowing, because he's tired of this female voice. Stop it, behave yourself, So you have left me to raise this young boy. If you are a responsible man, if you are a responsible father, if you are a responsible man that you want society to look up to you, then your role is to be responsible for the seed you have brought into this world. And how is that? Majority of the men, there's a song that says, this is a man's world, right? This is the world we are in with the men. We are in a world where men are raping, men are abusing, men are drug abusers. Teenage pregnancies are done from men without sanity. So as your role as men, can we bring back sanity to this world? Can we bring back sanity to the world? And the only foundation is a biblical background. A man that fears God will not be adulterous, will not abuse. He will protect, provide, and a visionary. You mentioned that, Apostle, to say one has to be a visionary. If you don't have a vision, you're going to be out there drinking, killing, and this thing of I want to get back to my yeah, you can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this is. I'm just going to put this out there, and it's hard for me to do this way. Half of Africa is Islam, half of Africa is Islam as well. So I don't want us to shift this perspective, because this conversation is incorporating the whole of Africa. We are talking in terms of Africa. Now, we do not need this to say the Quran will also not help in doing this, or any other religion cannot help in molding men. I've seen monks from the Hindus and the Shintoists raising men as well. So I would really appreciate that on take on these individuals. You can really download it that way. But now, because of our time, We're going to go for a quick ad break again. But before we go, Apostle Manyunda, how challenging is this for a man who is in his 30s and his 40s to start understanding that whatever he has learned in the past was wrong and he needs to reconstruct and reteach himself? And when you say how challenging is this, I also want you to address the other side of, is it possible for a man in his prime to rechange and pick up new roles and understand that he has been underperforming, he needs to up his game and take on a role that he probably has been missing? But we'll talk about this just after this commercial break.
Hi everyone, my name is Mbai Chinai. Today I just want to challenge myself and someone who might find this useful. COVID-19 continues to be a threat to us all, and I've been reflecting that the best that we can do for one another, especially in these moments, is to be there for each other, offering each other support. It goes a long way just checking out on an old friend, on our dear loved ones, and I would like to encourage myself and encourage others as well that may we find time just to call, text, and find out how our dear loved ones are doing, wherever that they may be. I understand we all live these lives and at times we just don't have time. But I think especially in these times that we are faced with, someone would be grateful if we call, if we give them a text just to check how are they doing. It will definitely go a long way. I don't have much to say, but I just want to say let's keep in touch. Let's just find time to check out on others, find out how they are doing. You don't know what someone is going through. Maybe someone is battling with all the effects of COVID-19. It has affected people in various ways. Someone might not have gotten sick from COVID-19, but it has definitely brought so much effects to families, to people around us, and it's definitely impacting all of us. So let's find ways just to check out on others, to be there for each other. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay. Paul, I am kind of challenged with your question because it looks like you came into my life. Let me speak of my history. I was brought up in a family where my mother is a well-known politician, and in the nation where we grew up in, rose in the echelons of power. So I grew up in a house where I had a more powerful mother and a father. My father was not docile, no, but I kind of saw one time or the other roles being changed, and I then got married at 30. And what Paul is now asking is, I had I had a picture. My role model at that time was my mother. But when I walked into a marriage, I quickly realized that a mother can never teach you to be a man. I needed a father who can teach me to be a man. And at that time, I then quickly, by the grace of God, had to hold on to the man who was my spiritual oversight, because I had to learn how a father is supposed to be like in a home, and I had to learn from a lot of fathers. So Paul, it is very critical what you have asked. We have many men that have been brought up with fathers and with mothers, and I have remember I father now many sons globally. I father politicians, business people. I father people, globally. And one of the things, even a man at 60, you can tell that this man was never fathered. He is just male by gender, but there is no father in him. And I have many women that come to me and they said, I have a male in my house, but I don't have a father in my house. And it is here where we must speak reality, because they are what are called fundamental and foundational roles of a father. And
sorry, Apostle, I just want to because I want to raise this point where you say no man can be raised by a woman, because I want us to come back to that specific quotation.
Yes. I want to say no man can be raised by a woman and become a real man, because your idea of a father is coming from a mother who does not know what to be a man is. And I cannot raise my daughter to become an effective woman, because I am not a woman. I don't know what menstrual cycles are all about. I don't know what hormonal changes are all about. I had on one of my panels a woman who was single, raising a boy, and she's beginning to have hairs grow everywhere. She broke down and she said, I don't know how to tell this boy how to deal with this. He's waking up with his male organ, up, and he doesn't know how to deal with it, and so on and so forth. So I am telling you, we have many boys to men.
Yeah.
That are 50, but they are boys because they have never heard the voice of a real father. Now, let me conclude by this 30 seconds, like Sam. Life, let me not talk about the Bible. Life teaches us life. If you can go into the animal kingdom, if you can go into the fish kingdom, if you can go even into the plant kingdom, the seed knows its role, the soil.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you go into even into the zoos, the father knows his role, and life teaches us life. So there are some things that no matter how much we want to come with new definitions and so on, if you violate the laws of for example, the laws of gravity, life will punish you. Life will punish you. Some laws that are just life.
I think, Apostle, I think why personally I'm being selfish here by jumping in, because I know others want to jump in, but why I raised that, I wanted to flag that point you made, is because firstly, we need to be cognizant of the society in which we're living in. So when we make such a statement, we have a lot of boys who are being raised by women, and we sit with a risk where a boy goes to a mother and says, I can't stay with you. You're not a man. How can you say you're raising me? You are taking me in the wrong direction. At the same time, we have a woman who is doing her level best to raise this guy, there's technology and all sorts of things these days, going and reading things online, researching, talking to their parents and whoever, and they're doing what they can. And lastly, we have, like you spoke earlier about the statistics in South Africa, which is a country in which we are in, where you were saying, I think you said 7 out of 10 children are born without a father figure. So I'm not saying that point is wrong, but I'm saying we really have to tread. Yeah, we have to tread with caution on that comment. But Paul, it's your show.
I just have a quick comment. I just have a quick comment. If you would.
Just before you go in, Yannick, I want you guys to take at least 30 seconds, just to bring in your parting shots. Believe you me, we are going to set aside a special week for this week to have each of you preempt what you have to say about men. For 30 seconds, I want to hear as a role what you think the role of a man is, or what you envision your role as a man to be.
Stan.
Yeah.
I'll take this moment to say, the apostle mentioned to me when I deal with what the apostles mentioned. Before I give my parting short, very briefly here, I just have to really deal with the reality of what the apostle mentioned, and I put that into context with my own life. I was raised by a single mother in a hyper masculine environment, for lack of a better word, the hood in America. And I think that when you think about a man in terms of its utility, right? The theory of the mind tells us that human beings were we're different for a specific reason, because of how we process information in our world. We live in a world today that's more informed than we ever have been in human history. Being an informed human, point blank. I think when you think about this, I don't think I'm less of a man because I was raised by a woman. I think I would totally disagree. In my reality, I think I'm more of a man. I've informed myself from a perspective of just simply being a human. I understand the responsibility of how to handle another individual, whether they're a woman or a man. Here's an individual, and here's a responsible way to interact with another individual. Here's a responsible way to interact with my neighbor. Here's a responsible way to interact with a person of a different color, of a different race, of a different perspective on life. There's an informed way to deal with all aspects of life. It really has nothing to do with whether you're a woman or a man. We live in a world today where we're informed more than ever. So when the apostle says that you need a man to construct your manhoodness, I am a man. I think I would even go as far as to say I'm more of a man than most men that I've seen that have been raised by men. More so.
Yannick, I want you to give your 30 seconds.
Absolutely, and I just wanted to mention that in terms of my parting short,
Amandla, Yannick.
I think that the role. I think that
please let's not drown. Let's not. Sam, you stop blowing a vuvuzela. Paul told me on social media that don't bring a vuvuzela to this show. So let's let Yannick have his 30 seconds.
Absolutely, and just briefly, I know this topic is very complex, and we can have a discussion on this for a very long time. There are very many different perspectives, but if there's anything I can leave this on this very broad and very complex topic, it's the idea that the role that men should play today is about highlighting the subjugated groups around them, whether it's highlighting, from my perspective, whether it's highlighting Black women, uplifting Black women, playing a role of, there isn't this idea of this hyper masculine persona, and making that translucent, dealing with the world from a perspective of informing ourselves in every aspect of our lives. So if I can say that the role of a man today is intersectional, and the uplifting of all the surrounding perspectives in terms of,
I'm gonna have to switch your microphone.
Whether it be female or binary,
Yannick,
or binary.
I'm so sorry. Your mic is. Leanne, go for it.
Thank you. 30 seconds. Well, for me, basically, my closing remarks are going to be based on principle. When you violate a principle as a man, you have caused the nation a national security. It's an issue. It's a national security. So if you begin to tell yourself that if I sin, it's going to cause consequences for the children, for the woman, then you begin to redirect and align yourself to purpose. What is your purpose here on earth? What is your purpose in the world, in the nation, in Africa? What is your purpose? And that's to build, protect, and to guard, to command as well. Because when you have a responsible man in authority, a man with a vision, a man with standards, because the reason why women then derive from having a man in their life is because men have not set the standard. What is the standard of your role in society? Once that is set and addressed, then we are guaranteed a safe environment for the kids and for the women. Good day.
Thank you. Let's go.
Go
Is
ahead,
it me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I was Amandlaring Uyanik there, because I think that today, and I say this with the utmost of respect, that today there was a classic example of how a statement in its construction, perhaps not in its intention, but in its construction, carries so much weight with respect to reinforcing these ideas around the limitations of women in society. And I think that at the core, that's part of the problem. I think that a statement such as a woman, I don't want to paraphrase incorrectly, but to suggest that a woman is incapable, I think is part of the problem. Because, I mean, if I think of a country like South Africa, where the majority of children, including boy children, are in fact raised not even by omama, mothers, but by ogogo, grandmothers, and become men, I think, who add, who contribute value in society in their respective spaces and ways, sometimes better than boy children who have been raised by men.
Let's wind it up. I'm going to give Apostle also 30 seconds.
Okay.
On this specific issue. All right. Okay.
No, Sam is still closing down. Sam, Paul was just saying you need to wrap up your 30 seconds.
All right, sure. I think I had mentioned it earlier on. I think that men have to create spaces for critical debate and discourse amongst themselves, define their role within modern society in relation to how it affects women and girl children, given the historical and contextual socio-economic circumstances of women and girl children, in particular, the Black woman and Black girl child. In conclusion, I would say I would want to reimagine a society that is led by the Black woman. And I often ask myself if us in our different spaces, white women as allies or potential allies, Black men and white men, are ready for a society like that. I think that's at the core of this conversation, is if we talk about transformation, inclusiveness, diversity, a reimagined society, can we allow those who should have been leading and who have always led to finally do so? And for me, that is the Black woman. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys, and it's very exciting. Stan, probably before I do my 30 seconds, one of the things that I would like you to probably consider is, I do a lot of work now here in South Africa, dealing with men that are broken and some that are very much respected and high offices, but broken because of the foundations that Leanne has been talking about and our dear lady here, and you realize there are some things that will catch up with you in life. But anyway, as my closing remarks, as for me, what life has taught me, and I want to speak now, from a broader perspective. Number one, men are supposed to provide vision for a society, to build a society. Men are supposed to be able to craft law, how we ought to behave. And number three, we are supposed to produce. And when I say produce, we're not saying women are excluded, but we direct the production, and we are supposed to be building blocks of a society, and of course protection. But these are what I call the basics, but they are what are called revealed functions of a man that you then see as you grow up as a man. One of them is you become leverage. Men are supposed to be leverage in the society. A lot of, sons, daughters, a lot of people leverage on men. And number two, they are supposed to be places of impartation, places of cover. They are supposed to be shoulders where people can lean on, cry on, rest on, and comfort, and ladders, for the next generation. Direction. We are supposed to be tanks or tanks of wisdom, and we are supposed to inspire the now and the next. And like the dear lady said, probably what we have to deal with are definitions. definitions. If we can get our definitions right and know where we are going, this conversation, we will all realize that we are speaking one language.
Yeah. And before you close, Paul, I know you want to close. I just want to mention something slightly off-ramping. We are living in a world of political correctness. And this is one of the challenges that we have today. I personally, on a personal view, I'm giving my personal perspective now, I feel that we are in an environment and a world that political correctness has become, even to some extent, a restriction in how we express ourselves, in how we approach things in our working environments, be it at work, be in society, be it at church, be it in religious circles, whichever circles. And I'm glad that our conversation navigated the way it did, and it exposes us part of those things of saying, how do we deal with this as we move forward, because society still needs to continue. But otherwise, back to you, Paul.
Thank you, Stan. Thank you. Well, I am intrigued and I'm excited because this is what we need as Africa. If we can sit down with our different understandings and where we derive those understandings from and perspectives and still be able to have conversations, then we're headed in the right direction. We're sitting here with different generations, obviously, and I wish we could have a teenager on one of these platforms to hear what they say also in the future about the perceived roles, because perception, actually everything hinges around perception. But yeah, it has been a great honor and a privilege to sit under the baobab tree with you guys. As I promised, reiterate that we are going to have just a follow-up conversation. So if you miss this conversation, be sure to tune in into this whole week. We'll be throwing in some jabs here and there, just to give each of us on the panel here a chance to probably go into what you wanted to explain way further. You can catch our conversations on YouTube. You can catch our conversations on Facebook and Twitter. Be sure to subscribe if you're not subscribed, but Africa is headed in the right direction. Thank you very much.